Every now and again, I see a film that isn't really all that great and special, and yet it still sticks with me. I think about specific scenes or overall themes explored in a film, and those thoughts follow me for a long time. But when I rewatch the film, I can still see why I don't really consider it a great film. So today I'm talking about one film in particular that I am still thinking about despite not considering this film one of my favorites or even really that great. I'm talking about Art School Confidential. Also, hi, my name is Shayna and I talk about pop culture and media. If you like me, subscribe to my channel. Or I'll do something unthinkable. Like button up a button-down shirt. Anyway, back to today's topic. So, Art School Confidential came out in 2006 and was directed by Terry Zwigoff. It's got a handful of stars like John Malkovich and Adam Scott, and some others you might recognize like Max Minghella. You might know him as Nick from The Handmaid's Tale. Ethan Suplee, Jim Broadbent, and Joel David Moore. Maybe you don't know all these names, but I bet you recognize their faces. Anyway, I don't really know anyone else who has seen this film besides my friend that I watched it with the first time around. And honestly, it doesn't seem like the film did very well. It got a whopping 35% on Rotten Tomatoes from the critics, and only mildly higher by audiences with a 48%. So why the heck is Shayna talking about this film, right? Well, despite the film not being particularly remarkable or great, it explores themes and concepts about art school and the art industry that I find funny, compelling, and accurate. It's a film that every now and then something will remind me of it and some of what it explores. So while it will likely never be my favorite film, I gotta tip my hat off a little. Okay, if you haven't seen it, which is probably a lot of you, let me give you a brief rundown of the film. Major spoilers ahead, okay? Like, I'm gonna give away some plot twists here. So, Art School Confidential is basically a film about how pretentious and phony art school and the art world is. We follow Jerome, a guy who really loves drawing and is like, I love Picasso, I want to be the great artist of the century. So he goes to an art school called Strathmore, hoping to do just that, but things don't work out and he learns that the art world is full of phonies. Eventually, Jerome is heartbroken because he tries so hard and fails to be recognized. Now, if that were the whole story, it would be fine, but perhaps not that interesting. But wait! There's more to the story. This film basically has two stories happening at the same time. See, the whole time Jerome is at school, there's like a strangler on the loose who is strangling and killing people. And Jerome befriends the killer without even realizing it. See, one day Jerome's class buddy Bardo takes him to meet Jimmy, a bitter, aging drunk who graduated from Strathmore. And Jimmy is all like, hey, if you want to be a great artist, you better be good at fellatio. And Jerome kind of shrugs it off, but later he comes back and tells Jimmy he was right, that basically it's all about fellatio and who you know, and even then fat chance. And that's when Jimmy shows Jerome his paintings, and his paintings are of all the victims of the Strangler, and it's pretty gruesome, like it shows what they probably looked like right after they were murdered, and Jerome is just like, oh yeah, these are pretty decent, but no need to think that Jimmy's a killer, it's probably just his macabre art style. Anyway, Jimmy gives Jerome his paintings, and Jerome hangs them up on display for his final project, pretending that they're his paintings. And then an undercover cop from Jerome's class sees the paintings and thinks that Jerome is the killer. So Jerome is arrested, and everyone thinks he is the Strathmore Strangler. And you know what happens after Jerome is arrested? Now that Jerome is believed to be the killer, his art is finally respected. The art professors and the art world are buzzing about his work. One of his paintings is on the cover of a magazine, and he has notoriety. And even though Jerome's lawyer could help prove Jerome didn't do the murders, Jerome wants the blame so his art can be recognized. And his art dealer also wants this so his art can make money. Oh yeah, and Jerome gets the girl at the end. The end. Also, there is one scene where Jerome is looking closer at the paintings, and like the victim's possessions are glued to the painting, including one of the victim's driver's license. And Jerome is looking and he's like, that's strange. Maybe Jimmy was the killer. Oh well, I'll still hang these up and pretend they're my art. Okay, so that's actually like a pretty compelling story, right? Don't you think? A young, naive person learning that their dream is not a reality and that the world he wants to be a part of is garbage. And on top of that, he is accidentally framing himself for murder and is okay with it because his art is finally recognized. That's a pretty unique story and pretty funny, I'll add. And there are definitely funny moments and poignant moments in this film that I'll come back to. But you're probably thinking, Shayna, if you like the premise and these aspects, why do you think the film is so mediocre? Why do audiences and critics agree that the film is like mid at best? Well, I'm not going to read the reviews to see what other people thought, but I'll tell you what I struggled with. There's something kind of flat about this film. It's like the world they created and the script, it all feels a bit flat. From the beginning, we see a cliche of Jerome as a child being bullied and using art to cope with it. And sure, this might be a real thing that happens to people, but the way it's presented feels a little cliche. Then there's the way that people talk in this film. Now don't get me wrong, there's some good dialogue and good moments, but off the bat, it just feels very scripted. Like characters are just saying what is typical of their archetype to say. Jerome is kind of a sensitive guy, but then also a brooding guy who says things like humanity doesn't deserve to live or something like that, and it all just feels a little cliche. Now, is it possible it was cliché on purpose? Yes, I think this movie explores stereotypes and is a comedy that is exaggerating things, but it just doesn't quite work. How do I put this? Every film builds a world where characters are a certain level of real or silly and so on. I think of a film like Heathers, and I think this is a film that's a bit on the silly side, right? The world that is built in Heathers, it feels a bit exaggerated and over the top. It kind of feels like the whole movie is a nightmare, or at least a bad dream. But it somehow works, and the people who like the film, I presume, like the fake world that's built there. They temporarily suspend their disbelief for the weird world. This same thing almost happens with Art School Confidential. Similarly, the film is a bit on the silly side, where things aren't necessarily realistic, but they are a bit dark and funny like Heathers. So why is Heathers a cultural phenomenon and Art School Confidential is not? To be honest, I don't know. If the film was more zany, maybe it would have worked better, but maybe it would have been too zany. If the film was based a little more in reality, it would be a little less of a comedy, but it might have worked a little better. Or maybe not. Honestly, Shayna is perplexed with this one. Arguably, if the film managed to move me and keep me thinking about it years later, it must be doing something right. Well, let's get into the aspects I like and some particular moments in the film especially. First of all, as I mentioned, it's a unique premise, and it has some good casting. We have John Malkovich, who plays one of the professors, and boy do I think Malkovich was born to play these types of roles. Malkovich is one of those fancy pants artists that paints triangles and thinks it's brilliant, but he's also struggling in the professional art world, and he encourages his students to explore and find themselves rather than care about grades or becoming famous. In a way, it is sweet and pure, or at least as sweet and pure as one can be in the phony art world. Then we've got Jim Broadbent, who plays Jimmy / the Strathmore Strangler. Now, I didn't know this guy's name till I looked him up, but I'll tell you, I definitely recognized him. And he kind of looks like a silly, kind British uncle. And I think that makes it all the better that he plays such a gritty character. Seeing him be a grumpy, crude drunk was a real blast, and if I'm being honest, his paintings of his victims were actually pretty good. Okay, now there's a few scenes in particular that I really like that I think make this movie memorable despite it not all coming together. First of all, there's the crappy art versus Jerome's art. So we continuously see Jerome's art up on a wall alongside his classmates' art, and while art is subjective and there are different mediums and styles and yada yada, I mean, I went to film school and dabbled in experimental, I get it. But it's clear that Jerome has some promising talent on a technical and aesthetic standpoint, and many of his classmates, not so much. There's a scene where Jerome is hoping for his art to be noticed by the class and for them to comment on it, but instead the classmates are taken away by a painting that is just some squiggles. Jerome is clearly offended that a piece that probably took a few seconds to make and isn't technically or visually good is being treated like it's something admirable. And then there's Jonah, his weird square classmate who has undercover cop vibes. And Jonah does a stupid, crappy 2D painting of a car, and the professor loves it, so all the students come up with very pretentious reasons they also love it. Basically, we see several times how art isn't really valued based on technical skill or how visually beautiful it is, but by wonky concepts and feelings and who is approving it in the first place. It's very much going off vibes only. And sure, maybe that's okay to enjoy art that way, but when you're paying to go to college to study art, I think maybe you should be taught some things and also be graded based on some things. I don't know. And there's one great part where Jerome talks to the professor because he's struggling in his class, feeling like his classmates hate him and no one likes his art, and so his professor encourages him to experiment. So Jerome takes this seriously, he reads books on different art styles, and he really steps out of his style and tries different things. There's one scene where they have like a pre-final and he displays all the different art he's done and he gets an A and he's so happy because his work has paid off. Only he walks around and sees that literally all of his classmates have received an A for their work, and that includes the ones that have like sticks glued to the canvas or whatever. And that's when he's disillusioned. He sees everyone gets an A to feel good and it doesn't really matter. And that's what I mean about judging and grading art in art school specifically. If everyone gets an A, does the A actually mean anything or have any value? Also, let's go back to Jonah, the guy who seemed like he didn't fit in because he seemed like an undercover cop. Well, it turned out he was an undercover cop. But he gets a little caught up in his art being liked by his classmates, and then he kind of messes up his mission a little bit. But even then, after he arrests Jerome, he asks Jerome if his art was good and if he actually had a chance at being an artist. I found this whole subplot funny for Jonah, and also, once the classmates learn that Jonah is a cop, they suddenly don't like his art anymore. They thought his crappy 2D painting of a car was good because the professor liked it, and everyone has their head up their ass. But it's only after the tides have changed and the vibes have shifted that they disown him. I think that's the kind of thing that this film is doing the whole time. It is simply dumping on and satirizing the art world. And sure, it might be exaggerated, but I think it does touch upon something real. While we are all allowed to like the art that we like, whether it's detailed art or something abstract that took 5 minutes, there is something to be said and explored about the ways that institutions judge and assign value to art. When we take something and turn it into an industry, it's going to be full of kiss asses and people who are willing to do anything ruthless to be successful. It's going to be full of pretension and phonies. Heck, even think about how this happens on social media platforms. Sometimes it's the more vapid and generic accounts and things that go viral and have a big following and a bunch of likes. Meanwhile, something more genuine and nuanced and detailed doesn't always get the same attention. I don't know, am I making sense? Look, if you went to art school and had a good time, that's fine. Please don't be offended by this movie or my take on it. I enjoy art too. But I do think weird things happen when we build industries around art. Things become exclusive and inaccessible. Some things seem to arbitrarily get more attention and value than other things. In fact, I remember having an aha moment in school where I was watching a video in class in which these commentators, who were all from the film industry, were talking about classic films they really loved. And I kind of just took these people's word as authority because I wasn't really thinking until one of the commenters said something I disagreed with. They compared two old silent films, Nosferatu and The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and they said that Nosferatu was clearly the superior film. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? On whose authority? Why and how is Nosferatu better? Clearly I like Dr. Caligari more, okay? But there was a big moment where I really began to question the way we assign value to art and how some voices are heard and valued over others. So, though it may be a bit ham fisted at times, I think Art School Confidential really did explore this idea in a unique way. They didn't have to include the murders at all, but I think it actually made the film more compelling. Without the murders, the film would have just been, what if Holden Caulfield was good at art and went to an art school? Do you guys know who Holden Caulfield is? All of that is to say that although the execution wasn't perfect at times and the film felt stiff and flat, it still managed to capture and explore very compelling ideas. And in a way, it's kind of fitting that the film isn't well regarded by critics or audiences. I guess in a weird full circle way, it does show that we all can find value in art, even if it's not highly valued by the people assigning it the illusion of objective value. I may not love this film, but I love that I found things I liked about it and continue to think about those things even years later. When was the last time a Best Picture film made me think this much? So what did you think? Have you ever seen this movie and did you have a similar experience? If you didn't see it, are you gonna watch it now? Let me know in the comments. But only nice comments, okay? Nice comments for Shayna. And while you're at it, please subscribe to my channel. And if you found this video interesting, stick around and watch this video over here that YouTube is recommending from me because you just might like it as well. Okay, thank you, bye!